I have everything from blue collar workers to 10-year plus litigators and law firms that I work with. So I have this vast spectrum. So I know exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, man, I need a body in a seat. And then you go through this entire mental exercise of they'll screw something up, or they won't show up, or they won't, do what they need to do. And it goes in stages. And one of those stages for me is, hey man, give them a chance, like be a human, like maybe they'll change. And I think 1 out of 100 has that actually worked out. I always say that some of the best things that I've ever done in business is hire the right person. And some of the biggest mistakes I've ever made is hire the wrong one and not get rid of them.
Treading water is the same as drowning to people like you and me. You better start swimming. Welcome to I'm the One podcast. I'm your host, Rob Green. Allan Draper here with us today. Nice to meet you, Allan. I'm excited to talk to you about entrepreneurship and being a father, investing, and wealth. Give a quick intro of who you are for our listeners. I call you a recovering lawyer.
Yeah.
And also a pest control owner, $20 million a year business. And you also mentioned you have a digital marketing agency and a few other businesses. So why don't you give us a little intro of yourself? It's a little more in depth than that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I was put on this planet, professionally speaking, to start and build businesses.
Nice.
And so for the last decade or so, that's what I've been doing. And I am a recovering attorney, but I am a named partner in a law firm.
Oh, okay.
So, but I don't practice law that much.
Okay.
And I definitely don't, for the billable hour, that's not really my thing. But I'm fascinated with the building process. I remember when I started my first company about a decade ago, and we're trying to make ends meet. And I remember thinking, I had this day where I was like, I can't wait until I don't have to worry about like payroll and like we're just in the clear, And that day came, and it came a lot faster than I thought it was going to. Within a year or two, we did quite well. And I remember thinking, man, what was cool was those early days when you didn't know if it was going to work out. And so that's kind of been the kind of the overview of my entrepreneurial career is I want to get back to that like unknown. And so the way I do that is by starting businesses. So I own 29 businesses, everything from law firms to, service companies like you mentioned. But the thing that I realized, Rob, was that it was those early days where the growth was happening. It wasn't when we were on cruise control, scaling naturally. It was when we were trying to make things work. We didn't know if it was going to work, things like that. That personally, I grew the most. And so since then, I've been attracted to that. And I've been pursuing the startup. And, each year I add a couple of businesses to my portfolio. And I'm just kind of on this mission to learn as much as I can through the startup process.
Now, I imagine you got partners in a lot of these businesses.
19 business partners.
Okay. 19 partners, which I've had good, bad, and ugly partners.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure, and I've never had that many, so I can imagine you've had a full range of different types of partners. I got a lot of things we could double click on here. So how do you think about, are these all businesses that you got in at the beginning or got in later?
So most of them are businesses that I founded.
Okay.
But there are a couple where I've become an angel investor over the years. So
okay.
I have a few of those in my portfolio. I have a few businesses where I've just invested really early. Anything past a seed round, I'm not interested.
Okay.
I like the high risk. Let's see, it's gonna 100x or it's gonna hit zero.
Yep.
And I have quite a few that have hit zero.
We all do.
But yeah, so there's a mix in there, but the bulk of them I started.
This will be great for the audience because this is always a discussion we have here internally and I've done mostly founding and I've done a few investments and one I bought a business and we grew it a little bit and then sold it, right? So I've done a little bit of that, not as much of that as I would like. We're doing outreach right now to find some opportunities that we think we can add our complementary skills to those brands and then grow them some more. So how do you think about it when you go to start? You found a business, let's say. Walk us through your thought process before you found the business, before you start the business.
Yeah.
Walk us through the idea process on that.
A lot of my businesses have been just problem solvers.
Okay.
So, for example, I own a service business, a pest control company, has 10 locations in 8 states. And we had a huge problem with our digital marketing needs. And I fought it. I tried different things. I brought it in-house. I, took it to a third-party agency. I tried a lot of different things over the years. And then I got to the point where it was like, you know what? I have to create something to solve this problem. And through that process, I was like, you know what? If I have this problem, somebody else does. And if I'm able to solve it, I'm probably able to sell it. And so we got to that point. So a lot of times it's that, but it can be, come from just an idea or a passion, something where, we're wanting to just create something that we're passionate about. But most of the time, more often than not, probably 9 times out of 10, it's solving a problem that one of my other businesses has.
That's probably the easiest way to do it because you know the problem. It's easy to identify. You're the customer. You're actually the first customer probably of your own agency in this case. So you know exactly what it wants. I find a lot of people try to go solve a problem, but they don't have any context around it.
Yeah.
They don't really understand the problem at an in-depth level, which is what you need to create an agency or to create software. You have to have the context around it, or you end up solving around the problem as opposed to the real core of the problem.
Yeah.
So when you let's use this example. When you solved for that for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
then you created an agency, I assume, that went out and sold the same services that solved your problem to other similar types of businesses. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. And you can't run them all yourself. So did you put somebody in place to run that then, like to be an operator?
Yeah. So usually it's a partner.
Got it.
So I'll go headhunt. I'll go find somebody, and I'll let them know, hey, this is what I do. I start businesses and then I back away. I don't officially run any of my companies.
That's great.
And although at some point I have ran all of them. So that's the idea. I create, a runway for us.
I love
but
it.
I'm looking for a partner where it's like, hey, dude, this is going to be your end all be all. This is kind of the game plan. Are you interested? If not, no problem. But most of the time I'm looking for an operational partner.
So how do you structure those kind of deals? Because I think that's what a lot of people get caught up on, right? They're like, hey, I would assume you're bringing in some money. They're bringing in some money. So they're putting some skin in the game.
So most of them, I've actually funded them.
100%.
Most of them.
Okay.
So a few of them we do require some upfront capital, but that's kind of my contribution is like I'll start it, but it's mostly in the form of a line of credit.
I gotcha. So you
So
give them a
it's
line
a
of credit.
loan. It's not like, hey, this is, company funds now. It's like, this is going to be paid back at an interest rate, but, and then bring somebody in, because a lot of times I'm not looking for an investment in terms of like a financial investment. I'm looking for somebody that has a skill set and they've never been able to break through because maybe they don't have the money to do it or they don't have the vision. And so I'm looking for, in a lot of ways, I'm looking for a technician, right? I'm looking for somebody that knows something about a particular industry that I don't know. Like I own a software company. I don't know how to code. I own a digital marketing agency. I know a little bit about marketing, but not that much.
Right.
And so I'll go find somebody that's sharper than me with those types of things, bring them in, and then, we have complementary skill sets, and I just get out of the way.
Do you give them an equity percentage in the business?
For sure.
Okay. What is the range that could be in? Is it, I'm assuming they're a minority partner.
Minority.
Okay.
And so it's been anywhere from 5% up to 49%.
Okay. That's a big range.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, they're
on the deal.
invested then. They're invested in the company.
Yep.
They're like, listen, I want to make this win. And like you said, most people, I think, especially their first business, they can't break through.
Exactly.
Because they don't have either the capital or they're missing some pieces. I mean, you and I both know how hard it is to wear all hats when you first start out by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why the failure rate is so high, I think, on startups, is because it's so difficult to be good enough at so many different aspects of business.
Yeah.
And if a couple of them, if you miss them, they're completely deal breakers. They crush the business.
Yeah. I think, one of the problems is, and Michael Gerber talked about this in the E-Myth, right? He talks about how, his example in that book was a baker, and she was like the best cupcake maker in town or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, man, I'm so good at making these cupcakes. I'm going to go hang a shingle and do my own bakery. And then she realized, hey, I'm still good at making cupcakes, but 2 problems. 1, I don't know much about the business and all those things. and I don't want to spend my time doing that. I want to spend my time baking the cupcakes. But when you hang a shingle, start a business, you realize very quickly that you don't have the time to do the thing that you're really good at.
Yep.
And so what I try to do is I try to position my partner so they have the time and the resources to do exactly what I hired or partnered with them to do, and add that technical skill to the business until they can find somebody to replace them.
How do you find those people?
It usually comes through somebody that I know.
Okay.
So I don't really create job postings. But I just hired a new CEO for one of my companies, and just signed his offer letter today. This guy, I don't know that I've ever met somebody at his level. He ran a department for a large national company without disclosing too much, and he ran a department that did $290 million in gross revenue every year.
Wow.
I met this guy through one of my friends that introduced me to somebody, that introduced me to somebody, that introduced me to him.
That's awesome. Did you put out feelers saying, I'm looking for this kind of guy? And then that spread the word throughout your network?
Yeah. So I start with people that are in my network that it's on a very intimate level. Like I'll go to them and I'll be like, hey, this isn't public information, which it's still not public information about which company I'm talking about, because I haven't told the company yet that this role is taking place, this change is taking place. And so I'll go to somebody and just kind of work like that. Every once in a while for a mid-level position, I'll post something on my social media, something like that. But most of the time, if I'm looking for a business partner or a really high-level employee, I'm going to spend months. I've been looking to fill this position for 6 months.
Wow.
And I've used headhunters before in the past, but my relationships just work a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. They know you. They know what you're looking for, what kind of person you are. They can help fill in the gaps. I mean, referrals always the best.
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't scale very well.
It's just a lot of work. So I'll put that work into really high level positions.
Okay.
This position, that I gave the example of is going to take us to the next level. So it's like in 3 to 5 years, I'll be patting myself on the back for it.
I think that's super smart. It's so tempting as entrepreneurs to just hire fast. And I mean, I've made that mistake many times. Mm-hmm. And we try very hard to hire slow and fire fast. Yeah. And I've talked myself into giving them an opportunity to, I can train them, I can coach them. They'll turn it around. I have done this so many times. I keep learning these same lessons over and over again. But it sounds like you've got a really good discipline around not doing that anymore and just finding the right person for the role.
Yeah. And I have everything from, blue collar workers to, 10-year plus litigators and law firms that I work with. So I have this vast spectrum. And so I know exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, man, I need a body in a seat. Yeah. And then you go through this mental exercise of they'll screw something up, or they won't show up, or they won't, do what they need to do. And it goes in stages. And one of those stages for me is, hey man, give them a chance, like be a human, like, maybe they'll change. And I think 1 out of 100 has that actually worked out. I always say that some of the best things that I've ever done in business is hire the right person. And some of the biggest mistakes I've ever made is hire the wrong one. Yeah. And not get rid of them.
And it's as much as you've done this and I've done this, I don't expect perfection. I expect just to improve my batting average over time. And what can I learn and how can I get better? Yeah. And that's how I think about it all the time. Because I have seen, I advised a company last couple of years up in Seattle. They've had tremendous success. The main founders put tons of money to work and had tons of success. And I've watched them hire people, still hire people they shouldn't have hired. Hire great people, but also hired some people you're like, whoa, that it really becomes apparent quickly. Like, hey, that may have not been a great hire right away.
I mean, I think you can get tricked a little bit in the hiring process. Yeah. And sometimes you can trick yourself. Sometimes you have a need, or you're busy, or, there's somebody else in the company that's suffering because that role isn't filled. So you have all these pressures. And so I do get that. That's one area that frankly I struggle with. I have, I had a sales manager a couple of years ago that was so terrible for our culture. And people told me time and time again, hey, this is what's happening in the office, and these are some of the things that he's doing, and it's affecting. And this person wants to quit. Really high quality person wants to quit, and I just I hung on to him too long, and so it's something that I really struggle with and trying to get better at.
I feel like most of us that try to be compassionate and care about the people that work with us have that challenge. I had that challenge recently, trying to let somebody go that the performance just wasn't there. We weren't getting to where we needed. We agreed what the goals were. We weren't getting there, but it was a personal relationship for me, and I held on longer than I should have. So I think it's nice. I've got my right hand person Elizabeth here, and I said, listen, from now on, if one of us says this person has to go, the other one has to get on board, because it's been a case where I've said that and she's like, no, I don't want to do that. I like this person too much. And I don't have all the normal excuses we come up with to not do it. But at the end of the day, the only thing that I keep trying to remind myself is what is best for the business.
Yeah.
If I just take myself out of it, if I was looking at an outsider and I didn't know anything about this, what's best for the business? And then that helps a little bit, but I'm still struggling with it myself. How do I get better at that all the time? Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. I mean, as much 100%. As AI is taking over the world, I mean, it's still people. And the difference between the difference between bad and good is significant, but the difference between good and great is also significant. A lot of times we have employees that are good, but they're not great. And you get those great people, and man, those are
different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Those are 10Xers.
Yeah. No, it's it's one of those things that you just and I like that rule that you have, because when I'm thinking about making a switch and letting somebody go, like in the back of my head, I'm like looking for something. I'm looking through their, employment history or whatever. I'm just trying to find one thing to hold on to them. But what you said about making sure that you're focusing on the company is so important. And it's interesting because we live in a day and age where it's like corporations and businesses are evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what I've learned over the last decade is, okay, I can keep this person. And even though they're not good for my business, like I'm going to hold on to them. But the thing that I've learned is at some point, somebody else is going to have to pay for that. And it's usually one of my employees. So I can either let this person go, or I'm going to lose a couple of other employees, or it's going to negatively affect my business. So I can't hire another position, 2 or 3. And that has helped me kind of realize, look, it has to be best for the business. There just is no other way. And in the end, if you hang on to somebody that's just not right, you're actually hurting them too. In a lot of ways.
I would agree with that.
You're stopping them from maybe getting into a role that they actually enjoy, that they can really, develop in and things like that. And in the beginning, it's really hard to justify it that way, because you're like, but then they're going to have to find it and do all this work. But you're really holding them back. It's a two-way street for sure.
I completely agree with you. And that does make me feel a little bit better when we have that conversation. I think it's one thing I always think about, and I saw this with the company I was advising to. They brought in a lot of high-skilled, high-dollar talent. And I felt like you could tell right away. It's almost a gut feeling. The superstars separate themselves quickly. I have never seen anybody where I was like, okay, this person's just an average employee, whether it's when I worked in corporate America or anybody I've hired, and then they've shown over time they're a superstar. It's never happened. I've never had someone I'm like, oh, they're good. They're average. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, like, oh my God, they're amazing. They're a superstar. I feel like the cream rises to the top fast, and you almost know right away. You're like, okay, this person's a difference maker.
Well, I mean, I agree 100%. And I think the reason why is because it's not necessarily a skill or experience type thing. It's like, what's their approach? How are they treating people? What's their attitude? And that you can catch pretty early, even if they're still getting caught up to speed with the business and things like that.
Yep.
And so then they can take anything on, as new things come, because of where they, how they position themselves, how they treat people and stuff like that. And so it's not like, okay, they don't have experience. You could tell, man. You can tell, like, day one, what is this person? How are they interacting with customers? Like, how are they talking to somebody? You can tell it's different when it's a special individual. So
yeah. Do you have any? Okay. Do you got any tricks or tips around that? Because do you do any testing? Do you have anybody come on board for a couple of days and shadow someone? Or are there any things that you found to be really helpful? I mean, you've got a wide variety of employees. Is there anything you found that really be helpful to not make that mistake of hiring someone before they actually, because it's a pain in the butt. Once they come on board, then you got to let them go. That's not good for anybody. Your employees have to spend time training them. Have you found any tricks to really identify and separate those kind of employees before they actually become full-time employees?
So we do a lot in terms of background checks, certain types of testing. So if it's a software developer, for example, we're going to have them go through some standardized tests so that we can understand the level that they're at, because I certainly won't know by looking at what they've developed. But I think the big thing is you talk about your culture a lot. So if I'll have whoever's doing my screening interviews, they're going to share that company's core values and the history of the company. And then by the time that I'm talking to them, or if whoever's interviewing them is talking to them, that's going to be the bulk of that first conversation. They're not going to be talking about their resume. They're going to be talking about, where do the interests align? And I can tell really quickly if somebody's like, man, just had one yesterday. I'm hiring a full-time videographer. And the person that was in the interview asked him, hey, have you had a chance to look at Allan's social media? It's kind of what he's into. And he's like, oh man, I've been traveling and I've been doing this and that. That's perfect, man. That's no problem. You just told me more than you could, just by what you didn't do. So there's some tricks like that, but talking about the culture, I think at the end of the day, you have to get to a point where you are aligning interests.
Yes.
So you're like, okay, where do you want to be in 5 years? So I'll ask this question. I'll say, where do you want to be in 5 years? And how does working here help you get there?
I love it.
And if they can't answer that question, it's probably not a good fit.
Those are two great questions. I've got two favorites of my own. And the number one is what you hit on already is, what did you do to prepare for this interview?
Yeah.
And that tells you night and day. Well, I looked at one site and then, I got busy with something else. Versus I had a guy who used to work for me for a couple of years who's now started his own agency, actually, on Amazon agency. I love this guy. I still talk to him all the time. And he came in the first time. He's like, okay, well, he cold emailed me, by the way, which is he's already in. Like, he cold emailed me and said, hey, I looked up your products, looked up your brands. I think you could improve here, here, and here. So I was like, all right, we're already ready to hire this guy. Like, you don't see this anymore. Like, That's how I used to think about things when I was looking for a job. Is like, how do I add value? So he was already up here. He walked into the first interview. I interviewed him. I said, what did you do to prepare? Well, I listened to this podcast that you were on a couple years ago with so-and-so and so. Then I watched this other presentation you did at this mastermind. I was like, dude, this guy's hired already. Yeah. Like, we're done. This is it. I can teach him the skills.
Exactly.
One of my friends, Dr. McCoy, who I just interviewed the other day, said he looks for hungry, humble, and smart.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I'm going to start borrowing that more. It's hard to assess the hungry and the humble part. The smart, we can do the standardized tests on. We use the Wonderlic as an IQ, so it's an approximation. Everybody that does the it's a 12-minute test. Do you know anything about the Wonderlic?
It sounds familiar.
NFL uses it a lot. So going into the NFL, they force you to take the Wonderlic test. I think what's his name? Used to play for Texas. Quarterback. Oh man,
Colt McCoy.
No, Young.
Vince Young.
Vince Young is famous for not doing very well on it. So as a quarterback, I mean, it's tough now.
Oh, I can't imagine
to read defenses and understand all the plays.
This is their playbook.
You better be smart, right?
Yeah.
It better be. So it's a 50-question test in 12 minutes, and it gets progressively harder. So question number one will be something like 2 + 2. And it was like 4, I got this thing. And you're flying through, and it starts getting harder and harder and harder. And it's I think it might be the only, I did pretty well on it, but might be the only test I've ever not finished in my life. I got to like 49. And I was like, wow, I've always been like done in like 10 minutes on a test.
Yeah.
And it was one of those. So we use that as a barometer. To give you an idea, an average score is like 19 out of 50. And so that's that's what we use for IQ.
Okay.
Just be like, hey, listen, I can't have you get a 10.
Yeah.
Or a 12. Like my 13-year-old daughter will get higher than that. Like I can't have you do that. It's got to be above average intelligence. So we use that for standardized, and then we try to measure the rest of it through interviews and behavioral questions. My other favorite question that is my all-time favorite that I got from a friend a few years ago in the mastermind is, Allan, if we were to bring you on and in 60 days we had to let you go, what's the most likely reason we had to let you go?
Yeah, I like that.
And everybody says that's a great question. I've never had that. And you can see the wheels turning. And what's so crazy about that question is the answers they give you because of the way it's worded.
Yeah.
I've had people, my favorite all-time answer, this guy was doing pretty well in the interview. And he says, man, he sat there and I don't say anything. I just let him work. Right. He goes, I guess gross incompetence. Not just incompetence, but gross incompetence. And I was like, wow, that is my new favorite answer to that question. Oh, but I've had everything. I was late too many times. Most people didn't like me. I couldn't get along with others.
Oh, man.
And so that's a cool question has been the most revealing I've ever asked. And then, some people are smart enough to nail it right with the right answer and what we think, what hopefully is true, but the right answer of what we're looking for, right? So that one has been the most revealing. Those two are my favorite. I don't generally have standardized interview questions, but those are two that I love to try to figure out.
Another thing that I've learned is whatever question you ask, if you frame it in kind of this context that you're going to ask somebody else about it, so I would say something like, hey, if I called your previous employer and I asked him why you left, what is he going to tell me or is she going to tell me? Because what in his mind or her mind, they're thinking, oh, this dude's going to call him. So I got to, make sure that I give him a straight answer here. But so the big ones I try to, especially that question. I love that question. I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know what happened with their previous employment. I want to know.
I love that. I mean, it's such a challenging thing to assess, whether they're a cultural fit, whether they're a skill fit, whether they're going to be hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely feels like one thing in the mastermind that I go to every 4 months. We talk about it all the time, and we shifted, from a few years ago being more tactical, then it was more strategic, which it still is a little bit of both of that, but a lot of hiring. How do we find better people? How do we find better fits? It's such a difficult problem today. We hire overseas sometimes. Overseas can throw in some new, cultural issues, time zone issues, all that kind of stuff. So it's something we're always trying to get better at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of lived by the mantra that if I take care of my people, my people will take care of my customers will take care of me. And it's super cliche to say, but it's your people are going to build your business. It's not you. Yep. One of the, when I have a lot of proud moments in my business career, but the moments that I think I'm the most proud of are when I go into a meeting and I don't recognize a few of the people that work for a company that I own. And I see the things that they've done and how their work has changed the company. They changed the logo, or they changed this procedure, or they changed how we do this or that, because then they're really passionate about it because there's that buy-in. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. A lot of small business owners have a really hard time letting go of the reins.
Yeah.
The quicker they realize that it's not their company, even though it is their company, the more they're going to be able to scale, the better they are going to be at growing it.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments is when they say, we don't need you in this meeting.
Oh, man.
That is the best. When it transitions from, hey, can we get your opinion? And then it goes from like, nah, we got this. We don't need your opinion on this.
So I used to work in an office.
Okay.
And up until about 4 years ago, and I'd go in there every day, and then I kind of backed it out to a couple days a week. And I noticed when I went into the office that people would ask me for things, and they'd ask for my opinion about stuff. And then when I'd go home, like silence, right? Wouldn't hear anything from them. And I realized, like, me just being there, I was just getting in their way.
That's awesome.
And so you have to get out of their way in a couple of different ways, not just physically out of their way.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that they know that they can screw up, and you're going to support them. You're going to have their back.
That's great. Great advice.
there's this story, and it was about this famous old banker in like the early 1900s. And I don't know if it was Charles Schwab or JP Morgan, but one of the accountants or traders made like a multi-million-dollar mistake, which back then $2 million is, 50 plus now. And the JP Morgan, whatever, calls him to his office. Guy packs up his little box of stuff, walks in there with his box of stuff. And JP Morgan looks at him and he's like, what's with the box, man? And he's like, oh, well, you're gonna, fire me because of my mistake. He's like, fire you? I just invested $2 million into you. And you're the only person here that's never going to make that mistake again. And so if we have that with certain types of mistakes, right?
Fair enough.
That's not every mistake.
Right.
But if it's hey, this person's out there hustling, they're trying to do the right thing. I have this method where I fire bullets first, then cannonballs. So I'll test things out. And if they're testing things out, trying to find out where exactly they're aiming, and they make a mistake, that's okay. I got their back. Because when you show loyalty at that level and you're like, hey, you made a mistake, you learned, like, I've got your back, especially in front of other people, that loyalty, they will never forget that. And they will always be loyal to you. You can't buy that. You can't buy that with increased salary.
I love that. I've got a little great phrases note in my phone. Bullets first, cannonballs second is going in the great phrases.
I wish it was mine. I wish it was mine.
Do you know
Jim
who?
Collins. It's Jim Collins.
Oh, yeah, Jim
Collins.
Collins.
His book, Good to Great. I think he introduced it.
Yeah, I just co-opt all those sayings. I don't remember where I get them all from, and I put them in the phone, and I pick a few that I like that I keep using over and over again.
Yeah,
and
sure.
then they're like, where'd you hear that? I don't know. Somewhere along the way. And some of those great phrases really, they hit home that point.
For sure.
Visually. Like you can see it. For me, at least, that's how I think about it. It's like, I can see the bullets and then I can see the cannonball.
Yeah.
And it just really hammers home that point. So I absolutely love that. While we can talk about entrepreneurship all day long, you'd mentioned earlier about making short-term sacrifices. I think sacrifice is a key word for you, for entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think especially what's going on in today's day and age with social media and stuff, and I'm making a big social media push to fight against this. It's like, 20-year-olds will go rent a Ferrari, take a bunch of pictures, put it all over social media, and then give advice about how they became an overnight success. And that's not entrepreneurship. And I just actually had a really tough conversation with one of my partners. We started a software company a couple of years ago. We're pre-revenue. It's going to be a really tough road. And I told him something. I said, I don't want to rob you of the entrepreneurial experience. And he's like, no, man, you're not robbing me of anything. Like I'm not, because we were talking about his salary and benefits and all these things. And when I started my first company, I was practicing law in downtown Phoenix. I quit my job. I go home. I tell my wife, hey, I'm going to, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. And she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm going to start a pest control company. Wait, what? And then I said, and we're going to move to Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, that last one. Oh.
And you know what she said?
What?
Let's do it.
Wow.
So it was in that process where I'm so thankful for. I'm so thankful for that grind. And that's something that I want to make sure people know, that there is a sacrifice. And that sacrifice is going to change their lives. You can take everything from me monetarily. I will build it again. And it's because I know how to, I moved out of a really comfortable house in Arizona. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit with my brother sleeping on the couch in the living room and 2 young kids. And it's like, I can't buy that experience. So I'm kind of on this mission. Let's sacrifice when we're building our businesses and we're building wealth, right? Like I'm not a Gucci belt wearer. I'm not like necessarily against it, but I don't think you should be wearing one unless you have the wealth to back it up. About a year ago on my social media, I created this poll and I said, would you rather be wealthy or look wealthy? And you can't have both. And I'm like, everyone's going to select, I would rather be wealthy.
The younger generation.
It was 50-50.
Yeah.
I had person after person say, is there any way we can look a little wealthy? And so that's my thing, man. Like I want, I grew up humble beginnings on a farm in Oregon, Idaho, right on the border. And I've seen what works. And, I have 10 laws that govern wealth. I believe that there are laws that govern wealth, just like there are laws that govern our physical reality. If I go to the top of this building and I reach over, drop a pen down, everyone knows what's going to happen. And I have laws. And one of my laws is that, you don't have any type of toy or luxury till you have at least $1 million net worth. And it's probably higher now because $1 million isn't what it used to be.
Right.
But, that's my whole thing about sacrifice is I think that it's a little different if you go out, bust your butt, create a business and make $1 million than if you go buy a lottery ticket and make $1 million. Those $2 million, they're not created equally.
Or if you worked at a big company and made $1 million over a few years also. A lot of people I found, I worked in corporate America for a while, and they overestimate the value that they put into, they brought to this 100-year-old company that would run with or without them, right? Yeah. And they think they were the catalyst to making all this revenue. Yeah. And you're like, if you just disappeared tomorrow, those orders would have most likely still come in and still done. It's different, I think. Two phrases come to mind. Hard choices, easy life.
Yeah.
Easy choice, hard. Easy choice is hard life.
Yep.
And then the other one that I love, I use all the time, is, we travel a lot. We, live here in Phoenix, and we get out of town this summer. It's brutal here, so we're fortunate enough to leave the kids that get out of school. We go somewhere other than Arizona,
here.
And then we come back right before school starts, and it's perfect for living in Phoenix. And a lot of people I've met over the years, when we've done this, like, oh, I want to do that, and I'm like, yeah, you want to do what I do, but you're unwilling to do what I did.
Exactly.
And that I say all the time to people, because I can't. We used to for a long time, we went to San Diego quite a bit. We have friends out there, and their friends would come over, and year after year, I'd see them. Like, man, I want to do this. I want to do something like this. And I'm like, yeah, how can I help? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Well, no, I was just, I don't really want to do anything. It was just kind of an idea. They want the easy button, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that you appreciate it a heck of a lot more when you do what you did and you grind through it. And I'm not saying that's the only way. I'm saying that you definitely give yourself a lot of confidence. And I feel the same way. Like, if everything was gone tomorrow, I'm going to figure it out. Like, you drop me off in the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to figure out a way to make it happen.
I used to get offended because I'd have so many people reach out to me on social media, call me, friends over the years. And they're like, hey, Allan, I've seen that, you bought another house, or you did this, or you did that. And, how can you help me get started? And my very first thought, I don't always say it, but my very first thought is, you don't want to do what I did. When you're starting a business, man, you really have to be careful, because it's going to hurt your marriage. It's going to hurt your relationships. You are not going to have friends because you are not going to have time for them.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I'm like, they would never follow up with me. It's like, man, you wouldn't even follow up. So you're certainly not. And every once in a while there's somebody out there willing to do it. And that's my entire platform. That's what I'm talking about, is that I'm looking for the people that they're like, oh yeah, easy. And I've ran into a few of them. They're like, hey man, I have a nice house in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm going to move, to cold weather. My wife's from LA. That was not an easy move, right? To Detroit winters and stuff. And from Detroit, started my business there, got it off the ground, moved to Boston, started my business there. And then we finally came back. But it's something that's required. The sacrifice is required.
That one of the first questions, I get the same thing where people are like, oh, I want to do my own business, or I don't want to work for anyone else, or I want to do something, right? More than what they're doing now, which I always applaud. And I'm such a believer in capitalism and being an entrepreneur. Like, that is my core. I'm not a religious guy. That's probably my religion, is I truly believe in that. And I love helping people. I love supporting people. But one of the first questions I always ask is, great, what are you willing to give up to get there?
Exactly.
And it could be money. Well, almost always will be money, time, and energy. It's going to be a combination of those three things. And so many people, and some people get offended by this, but I know a lot of guys that are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right. And I hear it a lot where they're like, I've talked about for a decade. Like, hey, I want to do this. I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm like, listen, it's been a decade. Like, it's probably not going to happen unless something really changes your life. And they get the golden handcuffs. They get a good paying job. They got kids. They got a mortgage. I get it. I was there.
Yep.
I was in the same boat, and you're making good money, and you got a comfortable life, and you're like, I could just do this. I could just do this. But man, it hurts my brain and my heart to do this, because I hate it so much. I got to go do my own thing. I'd rather do my own thing and fail
100%
than go and do that and be comfortable, for me. But the people that aren't wired that way, it's just, they're not going to change that way. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But I can't help you.
No, I've learned over the years that it's a personality trait. Risk tolerance, I think, is a personality trait. And I have a lot of really good people that work for me. Like some of the best people in the world. They clock in, they clock out, they go home to their family. They don't think about work until the next day. Some of the scariest words to me are a stable salary and good benefits. Even though a lot of my companies offer that.
Right.
But for me, for my personality type, I'll risk it all. I'll live in a small apartment. I'll sleep on the couch. I don't care. It's just, and it doesn't necessarily make me better than anybody else. It's just different. And I want people to understand what it takes to get to that level of success.
Allan, you're getting me fired up to start another business right now. Let's
do it, man. Let's do it. I have a few ideas.
Guys like us don't ever have a shortage of ideas. Yeah. It's always people to work with, which I give you tremendous kudos for doing that, because that is the challenge, right? I've got ideas every day probably on businesses that I want to start.
Yeah.
It's getting the person to help execute it, or the partnership, which I love that model of what you've done, of partnering with somebody and giving them the reins to kind of run it, and you pull out of it, and then you give advice where necessary and layer on or connect in some capacity to somebody else that's done that. I love that idea. Let's talk a little bit about family. You've got 3 kids?
3 kids, yep.
Okay. You had 2 back in the day when you went to Detroit, but now you've had a 3rd one since then.
Yep. So when we moved to Detroit, I had a 2-year-old boy and a 4-month-old boy.
Oh, wow.
And then my daughter came along about 5 years ago, changed our entire household. So
nice. So you said 11, 9, and 5?
Yep.
Okay. How do you integrate them into the businesses, or do you?
No, I do. They, I drive some nice cars. I love certain types of cars. And
you can say it, Allan. You're not bragging. What kind of I'm a car guy too. What kind of cars are we talking that you love?
Ferraris are a big thing. We found a little niche there, and we're developing a relationship with Ferrari. Nice. And so my kids will go to school and they'll tell their friends, hey, we have a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And then I'll hear their kids say, yeah, Maddox says he has a Ferrari, and I'll correct him right in front of them.
Yeah.
I'll be like, you don't have crap. You have $100 in your bank account. I just checked it.
Yeah.
I have a Ferrari, right?
My kids have a McLaren also.
Exactly.
As they tell their friends. So I understand. I understand the situation.
Yeah. So
I'm getting a McLaren. I was like, no, you're not getting a McLaren.
Yeah.
I'm getting a McLaren. That's not how it works.
Yep. And so I think I won't necessarily sit them down and say, hey, this is what we're working on. Although they'll come into my home office every once in a while.
Okay.
They'll see that I'm looking at a boring spreadsheet or something. Every once in a while, I'll ask a question. But right now, I'm talking to them a lot about their limitless potential.
Love it.
Talking about that type of thing. Talking about money. About how they have to always save at least 10% of everything they make so they can invest it. So getting him primed up with stuff like that. My 9-year-old the other day, I was talking to him about like what he wants to be when he grows up. And he's like, oh, for sure, I'm going to be a professional baseball player. And I'm like, that's awesome, man. You can do it. And he's like, but if that doesn't work out, Dad, I'm going to come work for you.
Okay. All right.
I'm like, deal.
I love it. I've got a great book recommendation for you that I read with my daughters when they were a little younger, about your kids' age. It's called How an Economy Grows and How It Crashes. It's written by an economist, and I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but you'll see it if you go to Amazon. In it, it starts off with 3 guys. It's cartoon style. It starts with 3 guys on an island, and they're each catching 1 fish per day. And by the end of the book, they get a full-blown economy, multi-island, multinational economy. So it covers trading and investing and interest rates and all the things of an economy, but in a really easy to grasp. In honesty, not just for kids. I mean, most adults in America should read this book, because how does the one guy, actually, without spoiling the book, one guy, he's like, you know what? I'm tired of catching 1 fish a day. I'm going to take today off, and I'm going to invest all my time and go make a net. Now, if I make a net, how many fish can I catch per day? And so he just, it starts off like that.
Awesome.
And they start thinking about it. It's a great book to read with your kid at night before they go to bed. And I've read it with my kids, and it's something that they may not get all the concepts in it, but it's just introducing the concepts to the kids. And that's one of my favorite all-time recommendations.
Dang, I got to check. That would be perfect.
You would love this one.
Yeah.
They'll absorb it. And even if they don't know it, the other one, I did an episode on this on the pod about Bank of Dad, which I highly recommend also. maybe I got this somewhere. I think I created it, but we'll find out. Someone will probably correct me in the comments. But what I did is after reading the book to my oldest daughter, I was like, all right, we're creating the bank of dad. And so you have the opportunity to invest with your dad. And she said, okay. And I said, that's an interest rate. And she's like, 10%. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a little hefty. And I go, well, it's got to have a time component. She goes, okay, 10% a month. And I was like, oh boy, that's going to hurt a little bit, but we'll be okay. We'll be all right. This is good examples because we'll get repeated, learnings, right? Yeah. It's not just a year, right? So I go, well, how much do you want to put in? She went and got her wallet and gave me all the money in her wallet. Like she had $400 and she's like, all right, I'm in. And I was like, hey, listen, I got some bad news for you. The Bank of Dad just failed. And we just read that book and she's like, that's okay. I took out insurance with mommy. We're all good to go. and I was like, all right, we got the concept down. Nice. This is great. And so I paid out, at the end of month one, she gets in $40 in interest. She gets $440 back. She's like, all right, plow back in. I'm like,
oh yeah.
I mean, most of my friends were like, I'll take that deal. Are you taking other depositors? And I was like, no, exactly. There are no depositors except my kids on this one. But then I introduced risk. And so then I would say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a 15% if you call the heads or tails at the end of the month, win, or you're going to take a 5% loss. I need to introduce that you don't always win when you make investments.
Yeah.
And we're still going to stagger it so it's got a positive EV for you. But we want to make it so you're willing to take those losses and start realizing what it's like to fail a little bit, right? And that I've had a few friends that have adopted that too. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, I ran into a woman a couple of years ago and she's like, oh yeah, still do it with my kids, still do Bank of Dad. And it just teaches them, gives them more lessons to learn about like, hey, I'm making an investment. Did you enjoy that? How hard did you work for that $40? Because your money worked for you. You didn't do anything that month, right?
Yeah.
And then also introducing the risk. And you're like, listen, it's not always going to be up. We all know that. It's going to be ups and downs. You're going to have to take on some risks. So that's one thing I've tried to do with my kids to teach them about that stuff.
Yeah, that's, I remember as I was going through undergrad, and I went to BYU.
Okay.
So conservative school. And I was waiting tables. And I was waiting tables, and at the end of this table, these guys were pretty cool. I was chatting with them throughout. And this guy's like, hey, Allan, I can give you like a 20% tip, or you can take whatever's in my hand. And I'm like, dude, what do you got in your hand? And he had $100 bill, and the tip would have been probably $20 or something.
Nice.
So I made 5X. And he said something about how gambling's not always a great thing, but there's a difference between gambling and taking risk. And I've thought about that over the years. And what's interesting is that I recently got involved in a startup sports book company.
Oh, nice.
And we're only like 6 months in, but over the years I've started thinking about like how risky business can be. And how the greatest payoffs are usually the riskiest businesses. I invested in a fintech app and haven't heard from the founder for a few months.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like, I think I think that's such a great lesson to teach your kids so they don't think, you can invest in bonds. You're going to get your money back. You're going to get your 2, 3, 4, 5%. You can get your money back. It's government backed. But I'm not looking for a good story. I'm looking for a great one.
Yeah. I love that.
And I think that's awesome. You teach your kids about risk, man.
It's interesting. My oldest daughter is much more comfortable with risk than my younger daughter. So I have to stagger the odds so much in her favor for her to take my youngest daughter. So we'll play games. We play like a lot of Rummy 500, her and I, and she'll have to be up like 300-0 before she'll make the bet or not. And so I have to keep staggering it. I have to find that spot where she'll be like, okay, yep, I'll take that risk. That seems obvious enough to me. It's a 10-1 return, Dad.
Yeah.
I'll take that risk. Where my other daughter will be like, any slightest advantage, and she'll be like, oh yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah.
It's got positive EV, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'm in on that. Doesn't ruin ruins my bank account. The other thing, have you started investing for your kids at all?
Just in mutual funds and stuff. Nothing crazy.
Since you've got so many businesses, you may want to, and again, this is not tax or financial advice, you may want to look into putting the kids on salary and investing in a Roth IRA. So my kids they fully fund their Roth IRA every year. And so it's in my opinion, the best tax deferred or tax, I don't want to call it avoidance, but tax limiting vehicle there is. And
dude, I didn't know kids invest in Roths. That's cool.
They have to earn income. So they have to have a salary.
Earn income.
Earn income. Roth IRA has to be earned income.
And they're taxed at the time it's put in, not when it's taken out on a Roth, right?
Right.
Which is the big thing.
And they don't make any money, so they're under the threshold of making any money. So they get no tax. They pay no taxes.
Oh, that's
I mean, they
sharp,
pay their normal, like, FICA taxes, their Social Security and Medicare, but they don't pay any income taxes because they're under the threshold. And then they can put the money into a Roth IRA. So my kids are racking up, we put it into simple index funds, and it's starting to accrue, right? So it's been a few years now, and they've got money in there. You got $20,000, and
I like
each next year it starts. It's $7,000 now is the max next year in 2024. So they're going to put in $7,000 next year, and so it's going to continue to grow and put them. It's kind of a plan B. I think, like, if everything went to hell, you keep doing this over time. Like you talked about, saving the first 10%. This is a great, like, everything went to crap that I've ever taught you, and something happens and there's crazy. At least you've got something to kind of, you're not going to be impoverished, right? You've got something as a plan B. That's not your plan A. This is your plan C or D, most likely, really. So that's something I've done with the kids. It's been fun.
That's cool, man.
So what about investing now? How do you think about investing? It sounds like you're going for the bigger winners. Do you think about it more like venture capital, or do you think about it more like private equity? And for listeners, how I define that is venture capital typically needs a one winner to pay for the 9 losers, where private equity needs a much higher batting average. They need to hit 8 or 9 out of 10, but their returns are typically lower. So that venture capital arm is more of a slugging percentage. They're trying to hit the grand slams, and whereas the private equity is more of a singles and doubles hitter, but they got to hit a high percentage. How do you think about that from, like, investing?
So for me, it kind of ebbs and flows. So the stage that I'm at right now is, like, I'm looking for some home runs. So I just actually let a fund borrow a large amount of money. And it's a hard money loan, so really high interest, short term, 2 months.
Oh, wow.
To close on a couple of deals that they had in their pipeline. But so right now I'm looking for some really risky stuff. But because I have so many businesses that depend on cash flow, over time that will change, where it's like, okay, like we need to make sure that we have enough cash to operate these businesses. So I'm still at the stage where I'm so financially intertwined with my businesses that I'm not a true investor in the sense of the word, right? So, but generally I like higher risk stuff. I have a couple in the pipeline that are going to be absolute home runs. I was texting one of the founders last night, and I asked him when his next round is, because I'm so excited, and I got in on a friends and family round. So I like that stuff. I like rolling the dice a little more, but there is a little bit of a mix. So I'm probably middle of the road.
Okay.
So I'll do some lending that's secured at a decent rate, 14, 15% right now.
Yep.
With prime at like 8.25 or something. And so I like to diversify, kind of like I like to diversify the industries that I'm in with business.
I think that's great. You've got a mix of all those different asset classes as you think about it from a risk perspective along the risk spectrum.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, for sure.
I love that. And then how do you think about, depending on what you read or what the study is, they say, a business owner makes 85% of the money he's ever made from a business the day he sells it. He pulls all that money because he's pulling all the forward revenue and profit to today. Have you sold any businesses, or do you think about running these forever? How do you think about, like, the businesses you own today?
I've sold some equity in a couple of businesses. I've never completely sold, but I do have a few on the horizon that I'm going to exit.
Nice.
I have a few that, what's funny is that just yesterday I was talking to my wife about potentially spending a year or two in Puerto Rico.
I love it.
But we would want a couple of companies to be sold at that time to kind of make it worth it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I have some businesses that cash flow really well, which I always say that the best way to build a business to sell is to build it not to sell.
I agree with you. So
we're in that process with a couple of them where we're gonna start kind of looking. There are businesses that have been around for 5-8 years, and so we're gonna be looking at 8-10 by the time we sell them. And yeah, I mean, that statement would totally be true in my case, because most of my net worth is tied up in privately held companies.
Right.
For sure.
Have you been to Puerto Rico yet?
Yeah, I went for a podcast just last year, about this time last year.
Have you looked at areas like Las Palmas or El Dorado yet?
So I spent some time in El Dorado.
Yeah.
I rubbed shoulders with some pretty wealthy individuals. That's why they're in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, of course.
And so I spent some time at the Ritz-Carlton in El Dorado.
Yep.
But I also spent some time in San Juan. So it's a mix there. And I was talking to my wife about that. I was saying, like, hey, there's some places that, we would have to live in. And, we have young kids and stuff. So, we're mulling over. We have a place in Naples, Florida, which is, not a bad flight from San Juan. So we'll see.
I know a lot of e-commerce entrepreneurs in my space that have moved to Las Palmas. I know a few guys that live in El Dorado.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my friends, actually, he's in the mastermind. He just left. He'd been there for a few years, and him and his young kids and wife, and they moved to South Carolina, actually, because I think they got a little tired of the island life after a few years. So
yeah,
we've looked at it. My wife and I have talked about it. Hasn't been a compelling enough reason to do it yet. So it's something that we've kicked around a little bit because there are some significant tax advantages if done right.
Yeah. So what we were talking about is setting, we're meeting with our accountants and attorneys to see, like, hey, what would be the difference? And so we're going to have a threshold, and it's looking like it's going to be, 10 to 15 million, right around that range, where it's like, okay, if it's above that, we're probably going to do it.
Yep.
Or we're going to consider it at least.
Yeah. I think that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Well, I appreciate you coming in. This has been a great we can sit here and talk all day long.
All day, man.
I love this stuff. So I love meeting new people and having great conversations about this. I think there are a lot of nuggets for people to take away from this and take action. What would you advise somebody? I feel like a lot of podcasts and a lot of conversations leave, like, people get motivated, but they don't really know what to do next.
Yeah.
Are there any action steps or someone who's, let's call them an entrepreneur, someone who wants to start a business, and they've been thinking about it for a few years or a few months, and they're ready to take action. Any advice for someone like that?
I mean, it's a little biased, but DM me on Instagram.
Oh, there you go.
I'll give you some next steps. I'll give you a 15-minute pep talk.
Perfect. Where can people find that? What's your handle?
My handle's real Allan Draper.
Okay.
And I recently just completely revamped my social media with an emphasis on it actually being real, what the real world is like. And so changed my handle and everything. But I think I don't know specifically for the listener, but they need to do something where they just can't back out.
Mm.
So whether that's go buy, a piece of machinery or something, or move to Detroit, Michigan, right? It's a lot harder when you kind of burn the boats, so to speak. Yeah. So you have to do something like that on kind of the lower end, less risky end. Just start reading something, or listen to podcasts like this one. Get that motivation, keep it going. If it's inside of you, you will not allow yourself to not do it. It's just there. I can't imagine me not being an entrepreneur.
Right.
I was doing this article for a local magazine, and they asked what my first job was, and I was trying to remember because I started working when I was like 7 years old. I was like, I was hustling the neighbors for raking their leaves and shoveling snow. One of my first like W-2 jobs was when I was 14 years old. I would fry donuts before I'd go to school every single morning for 2 hours.
That's awesome.
So that type of person, like, I can't imagine anything else. But yeah, reach out to me. I'm happy to like point people in the right direction. Check out some good resources, stay motivated. Or if you really want to do something big, make an investment, a financial or physical investment in something that's going to make it hard for you to back out.
I love that. So Instagram, real Allan Draper, Allan.
Correct.
Draper. Okay.
Correct.
I just want to make sure. So that's a place to find him. Thanks for everybody. I appreciate it. Go check out Allan on Instagram. And thanks so much.
All right, brother.
All right,
appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with friends. Visit I'mTheOne.com and ask me anything. And as always, stay curious and never stop becoming the one.